Good evening and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series to hear your favorite writers or perhaps new to you writers in conversation as if you were eavesdropping on us in a coffee shop. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian here at the main branch of the Cleveland Public Library. And one of my favorite things besides reading is talking to writers. It's an opportunity to get to know their craft, what inspires their stories, where they like to write, essentially getting to know them better and seeing them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. And this evening, we are so lucky to have Laura Samotin joining us to talk about her new novel, The Sins on Their Bones. But before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. To find out who else is visiting Writers Unplugged, both virtually and in person, visit cpl.org/upcoming. And Max Backs Books on Coventry is our wonderful independent bookstore, and they have copies of Laura's books just waiting for you to order once we're done or while we're talking. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will be sure to ask Laura. So a brief introduction. Laura has this incredibly impressive academic background. She has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Pennsylvania. She has a Master of Arts and a Master of Philosophy from Columbia University. She earned her PhD in political science, international relations at Columbia. And prior to that, she did pre-doctoral fellowship positions at both USC and Notre Dame. Go Irish. She was also the postdoctoral fellow in national security and intelligence at the Salzman Institute of War and Peace Studies at Columbia University. So needless to say, she's incredibly smart. And after reading this book, The Sins on Their Bones, I can say it is a wonderful reflection of her background in which she balances her knowledge both of military tactics, power, and then asks us all philosophical questions. Laura's YA and adult fiction is grounded in Jewish myth, mysticism, and her Eastern European Jewish heritage. In 2021, she served as a #DV mentor, and she was a 21 to 22 Write Mentor Summer Program. And she also runs the website Query 101 to help writers on their writing journey. She lives with her spouse, and when she's not researching or writing, she relishes her role as a full-time cat servant. So please join me in a warm welcome to Laura.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. So this is really exciting. Thank you to Amanda for introducing the two of us. Amanda knows you, she knows me, and she knew that this book would be exactly something that I would love. And I love it when people, librarians and, book reps are able to make that connection. So why don't you give us a quick elevator pitch of this story?
So The Sins on Their Bones is a queer adult dark fantasy. It is the story of two ex-husbands on opposite sides of a civil war fighting over the same throne with a very daring and very handsome spy master caught in the crossfire.
So well said. So I'm looking at your background in creative writing. So you mentioned that you're influenced by your Jewish heritage and mysticism. Where did you get the idea for this story?
So it's actually pretty funny. This was not the first book that I wrote, but I started writing during the pandemic. So I'm a baby author still, and I wrote a lot. And when I was a kid, I was a huge fantasy reader. I kept that until I was an adult. But everything that I read had this implicit Christian subtext. So like when I was a kid, I did not realize that Aslan the Lion in the Chronicles of Narnia was supposed to be Jesus. Like people were like, savior narrative, like Harry Potter is Jesus. And I was like, oh, like it just went right over my head.
Right.
And the only times that I got to read books that had Jews in them were when I read books in school about the Holocaust. And so every time I saw someone like me in a book, they were the victim, or on the rare occasion that the Jew was not a victim of the Holocaust, it was a story about how they triumphed by punching a Nazi in the face. So I was like, you know what I really want?
Yeah.
I really want a book where it's just fantasy and there are Jews, but there's no like pogrom or Holocaust or anything like that. Like I just want to see myself in a fantasy book, and I don't want it to be about trauma. We have enough of that in the real world. So it's
exactly.
I just want my own escapism.
Right.
So When I started my writing career, I had my phenomenal agent. We went out on submission with a whole bunch of books, all of which I was writing that had the same like Christian-centric savior religion story, because that's just what I had read. And all of those books just died. None of them sold. And so I was kind of frustrated, and I was like, you know what? If I'm going to write unsellable books, I might as well write a book that's unsellable in a way that I like. So I said to my agent, what if I wrote a book where everyone was a Jew? And to her credit, she was like, go for it. Like, do it.
Absolutely.
And that was kind of where the idea came from. Not the specific plot idea, but the idea of the world that I wanted to build, a world where it was Jewish normative. So in The Sins on Their Bones, yes, everyone is a Jew. Mm-hmm. All of the magic and the myth and the mysticism is based on real Jewish, it's based on Kabbalah, it's based on folk tales, it's based on real world stuff. Mm-hmm. And plenty of terrible things happen in the book, but nothing happens to anyone because of their religion. So that was really the genesis of the idea.
Yeah, it is a fabulous book. And I don't know if you can see, you all who are watching, the cover is absolutely gorgeous. And I know as a librarian, we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but the cover is so darn intriguing. There's skulls and the colors and the text. And you're right. As a librarian, I want to make sure that I have every possible book on the bookshelf, right? People want to see themselves in books. People want to learn about other people through books, right? I think it's a fabulous thing. And so what better for you to do than to write what you want to read, and how many people you are reaching as a result of this story.
Yeah, I mean, first off, all credit to the cover designer. Her name is Talia Abramson. She did a beautiful, phenomenal job. When I saw this cover, I just died. You're actually talking to a ghost right now. It's it's so nice, and the cover for the sequel is even better.
So there's a sequel coming. I mean, I saw that, but I can't be more excited.
There is absolutely a sequel. It's coming in June of 2025. So.
Okay.
Kind of a long time from now, but not actually.
Oh, you know what? It's amazing. Like, time flies. I can remember when we first were introduced. And it was like back in April, and I was like, oh my God, September seems so far away. And I blink and here it is.
And it's there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's usually and like no concept of time anymore either, ever since the pandemic. I'm like, wait, what?
That's usually how things work too, with like deadlines and stuff. I'm like, oh, I have so long to write my next book. And then I blink, and all of a sudden it's like, oh,
I better get started.
In like 2 months. Whoa.
Yeah. So speaking of the cover artwork, your website, which is your name, laurasamotin.com.
LauraRSamotin.com.
Oh, Laura R. Samotin. Forget the R. Okay. My apologies. Talk about incredible artwork. So when you navigate to the website, they see your name and they see the little things that they can click on at the top, and the artwork. I will just say that I didn't look at that before I read. Kind of one of those people that doesn't kind of want to see certain things. And then I looked at it afterwards, and I was like, oh my gosh, it is exactly who I pictured in my head. I have the dark with the curls coming down his forehead. I'm like, wow, spectacular.
I have been so lucky to work with so many phenomenal artists. It has been truly a pleasure. I'm a storyteller. I am so hopeless at visual art. Like, my editor can tell you, there were times when she was asking me, like, how are these two people sitting next to each other? And so I drew her pictures, air quotes pictures, which were like stick figures with like the arms coming out of the head.
Yeah.
And so I am so in awe of anyone who can do visual art. And I've been really, really lucky to work with a whole bunch of artists, both well-known and up and coming. And it's one of like the great pleasures that I have, is getting to see artists take my characters and bring them to life. Because obviously as a writer, I don't like visually see my characters ever until I get art of them. And then it's really stunning.
You don't see them like a little bit in your mind as you're creating them, or how does that
This is so funny, because almost all writers that I know are visual to some degree. So when I write, I describe it as, it's kind of like watching a movie in your head and I'm sitting there and transcribing it.
Yeah.
But the funny thing for me is that all of the figures kind of have just like blurs for faces. Like I don't visualize faces very well. I'm not good with faces in real life. And I think that's part of the problem.
Good, this works.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's, you know, it's like a body that's moving around and the face is just a blur. Like it's in some episode of The Twilight Zone.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, so that's why it's really great to work with artists where I basically I give my artists like, okay, this is an Eastern European man who's 28 and he has brown hair and blue eyes and he has a serious case of depression and so he doesn't really eat anymore. And
there's the gauntness that they picked up in his face. And I'm always amazed, you know, not just with writers who can take words and create characters and worlds and scenes where we feel like we're right there, but then it also translates to the visual arts where, you know, with the few sketches, I mean, I need a ruler, you know, to draw a straight line, and even then it's iffy, you know, to see that emotion in a person who's been sketched is phenomenal.
Yeah, I've been very, very lucky. So my artists are great because I give them like 4 descriptions and I'm okay, go off to the races. Like I can't help you with anything else. This is all you get.
Did they read your book and then sketch, or is it a little bit before and a little bit after? How does that process work?
It really depends on the artist. Okay. I'll call out one artist. Her name is Ash Arens. She's at Spookyeist on Instagram, and she is the phenomenal artist who has done all of the interior artwork for the book.
Yes.
As well as some other amazing paintings. So she is incredible. She read the entire book cover to cover, and I think did such a beautiful job. She was actually the first person to do art of Dimitri and Vasily, the 2 main characters. So she did a wonderful job. And then I have to say another of my favorite artists to work with, who also read the entire book, is Rosie Thorns.
Okay.
You can find her at Rosie Thorns 88 on Instagram, and she does beautiful paper craft art, which is actually me in real life, and was the inspiration for one character who has an interest in paper craft in the book. So she also reads the entire book, but a lot of artists understandably do not have time to sit and read an entire book. And so, you know, I work with artists depending on their preference.
Yeah. So I'm joined in conversation this evening with Laura Samotin, The Sins on Their Bones. So can you take a minute and introduce us to these amazing characters?
Yeah. So the main character of the book is Dmitry Alexiev. He is the former Tsar of Novosvitsevo. He has been deposed by his own husband, who, is not a very nice guy. So he became the Tsar, just like the ruler of the country, when his entire family was killed in a bombing, and he was never meant to rule. So he was young and he took the throne with his husband, who was the lord of a major but kind of rural province. And so the story starts with Dmitry, who has lost this war that his husband waged against him, and he is now in exile with the members of his court who survived, including Vasily. Vasily Sokolov is his spy master, and Vasily is very talented at ferreting out information and also hopelessly in love with his boss, as one does. And they are currently strategizing about what to do with the fact that Alexei Balakin, who is Dmitry's ex-husband, is on the throne. And there is something very wrong with this guy. I would say one of the major themes of the book is don't mess with death, because death will mess back with you.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. So Alexei is the current ruler of Novosvitsevo. As I said, something is very wrong with this dude. He is a practitioner of the holy science, which is a kind of twisted form of the religion in the book. And he's got some issues.
He's got a lot, but we won't unpack all of his issues here tonight because just simply not enough time.
Yeah, it's also a bit of a spoiler, but they're bad issues.
Well, they're severely bad issues. So initially it looks like a quintessential battle between good and evil, right? But then when you stop and you really think about it, maybe that's too elementary, and you really start to think about people and the decisions that they make and why they make them. And most people, when they make a decision, will justify or think they justify why they did what they did, right? And I think that's the case in some degree with Alexei, that and this love of power, but it is not, good. He rules through fear and through terror and
Yeah. So I think that the most interesting villains are the morally gray ones, personally. I think that when you have a villain who's just bad all the way through, it's actually not very interesting, because those people don't really exist in real life. And I think that the scariest villains are the ones who could walk down the street and you could look at them and go, like, that's a normal person, but they actually have the capacity for great evil. And to me, it was really important to show Alexei's side of the stories. This is a multiple point of view book. And in the book, we actually get Alexei's point of view. So it's a villain point of view book, if that's the trope that you like. And the thing that I wanted to center in the book for Alexei's character is that no one believes that they're the villain of their own story, right? No one's walking around going, I'm the villain. You're the hero, right? And one of the very complicated things about Alexei as a character is that not only is he supremely convinced that he is right in doing all of these things that, maybe started off a little more garden variety controlling or whatever, but have really kind of gone beyond the pale, that he's actually very good at his job. He is an extremely competent ruler. He has his stuff together, and he's actually a lot better at ruling than Dmitri ever was. It unfortunately coincides with him being a power-hungry monster. But I wanted to evoke really complicated feelings in readers where it's like, he was wrong and we know he was wrong, but to what extent is he allowed to justify his actions because they had the right results? And so, like I said, I really enjoy morally gray villains, and I really wanted readers to kind of reckon with immersing themselves in that kind of point of view.
Absolutely. So I'm joined in conversation with Laura Samotin, The Sins on Their Bones. Incredible book. Because I think at one point Alexei described Dmitri as like being too kind, not being really able to rule anybody, right? And so I think it's kind of interesting. There's tension the entire time. I mean, the scene, the book opens, right? Dmitri is bereft, right? He lost his husband. And so like I've read the quote, like, grief is the price of love, right? So this is somebody he loved and has lost. And so it becomes even more complicated as they vie for that same throne.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I think of this book at its heart as a story of two relationships going in opposite directions. So on the one hand, it's a story of a very abusive, very toxic relationship between two people. And, obviously one of them is still really stuck on it. Dmitri at the beginning of the book is still very much in love with Alexei and does not have the mindset of being able to see that what Alexei did to him was very wrong. And so part of it is that process of unlearning, of regaining his self-worth, and of reckoning with the fact that no matter what, he probably will still always love his abuser at least a little bit. So it's the story of a breakup, but it's also the story of a new relationship coming into being. And so, I personally really enjoyed centering that, that duality, the relationship breaking up and the relationship forming at the same time, and putting that in the context of power politics in an analog to Eastern Europe. And throwing in the complication that none of these people are ordinary people, and no matter what their hearts want, they do also still have obligations to a broader population on the basis of who they were born to be. And so to me, that was as just a fascinating bit of tension to explore as a writer, but also as someone who has an academic background in this period.
I was going to say, this has to have informed how you choose the leadership and their, I guess, style for military and cutting off supply lines, and it's fascinating. So I'm glad for your incredible backgrounds.
Thank you.
And can see it has informed the book.
It helps when you're able to look at all of the research that you're doing for your day job and apply it to your night job. So I was very glad to be able to use that knowledge and have it create a more vivid world.
So how did you know where you wanted to set the book? I mean, you created this entire world, names, characters, names of regions. Where did all that come from? I mean,
so the world came from wanting to have an analog to where my family is from in Eastern Europe. So my mother's family, my father's family came from all over Eastern Europe in the period before World War I. Some of them came to the United States in the late 1800s. Some came in the early 1900s. And they were all from what are now different countries, but back then were part of Imperial Russia. Okay. And so as an Ashkenazi Jew, my family has a very complicated historical relationship with the place that we're from, because, you're not Russian, you're Jewish. Like if you're from Imperial Russia, like your passport literally says Jewish. It doesn't say Russian.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, you were not allowed to claim that national identity. But by the same token, you were subject to a lot of violence and a lot of fear and persecution because of your identity and where you were from. So it was almost like the worst of both worlds. Like you didn't reap any of the benefits of being a citizen, and yet you still were subject to all of this persecution. And a lot of my family members left Eastern Europe actually because they were being conscripted for the Tsar's army. It's very, very common for Jewish men to be conscripted to serve on the front lines or serve in undesirable, dangerous positions. And so I was like, you know what? I would love to see or imagine an alternative version of this place where we don't have to reckon with that being what happened, right? I really wanted to imagine an alternative version of the place where my family is from without having that trauma associated with it, which is why I chose to create an entirely second world, because you can't take the real world and magic the trauma out of it, but you can create an entirely different world that has a blank slate for you to play with. As to the names, I have to give credit where credit is due. Whoever made fantasynamegenerators.com to the writing community and to all of my books.
Like waiting for you to say Chat GPT.
No, I would not use AI, but fantasynamegenerators.com is where I've gotten a lot of my names. I'm so bad at coming up with names. Some of them are little plays on real world locations. So my mom's family is from Wilna, Russia, which today is Vilnius, Lithuania. But that's why the city that Dmitri is in at the beginning of the book is Wilnetsk. It's just a little play on Wilna. And that's why the country that they're in is Lietuva. It's just a little play on Lithuania. But a lot of other stuff was just generated by a very wonderful and well-resourced name generator. And then some of it was interesting to go through the process of naming things and have to reckon with my own internalized Christian normativity. So at the beginning, the capital was Sankt Mikkelberg. Yeah. Because I was like, oh, St. Petersburg, right? Yeah. And then my husband, he read the first version of the manuscript and he was like, why is this? He was like, we don't have saints. Why is this St. Petersburg? And I was like, I I never thought about it that way.
Right.
Like in my own, I'm trying to sit here and create a Jewish normative world, and my own Christian normative bias as a Jewish reader and writer is still coming out. Which is why the capital is called Rav Mikkelberg, because in Judaism, a learned person is Rav, an honorific. So I was like, you know what? We wouldn't have, St. Petersburg. We'd have Rav Petersburg. And that was, so that was just a fun little thing to get to play with.
Yeah, I love the little, like, now that I understand a little bit more, like the little Easter eggs that are hidden throughout, which is wonderful. Yeah. So I'm joined in conversation with the amazing Laura Samotin, who wrote The Sins on Their Bones. Talking a little bit about, your background and where your family came from, and that, passports didn't say Russian, even though that's where they were from. They said Jewish. I'm kind of struck by thinking about Alexei's story and Dimitri's story, that they also have that sense of not really feeling like they belong, right? Because Dimitri was like, like the third son, and his family really didn't pay much attention to him, right? And then you have like Alexei, who seems to come from, not much, and he's trying to figure out where he belongs and thinking it's, at the seat of the throne. And, it's just the complications, I think, about identifying with bunches of things and then trying to figure out, okay, now where do I feel at home, and the conflict and the tension that arises from that.
Yeah, I think that, when you have characters, it's important to give them the same kinds of insecurities and doubts about themselves that real people have in the real world, right? Because that's Absolutely. How you get readers to connect. And I think that, a very common theme that a lot of people reckon with is, am I deserving of this? Or am I capable of this? Am I up to this task that's been set before me? And this is obviously an extreme version, because as you said, Dmitri was the third son of the Tsar, and he was never meant to inherit. He had two older brothers, and it was really an accident that he ended up on the throne. It was like an accident of death, really. Yeah. And so he comes to power and is having to reckon with the fact that he was never trained for this. He was never educated like he was going to rule. He was the spare of the spare. And so, his family was like, great, you'll be great for marrying off for a large amount of money. And that was his only purpose in life. That was the only thing he had ever been raised to do. And so when he was given this opportunity, there's a question in his mind of, am I capable of this? And then Alexei, on the other hand, is he's supremely self-confident. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So Alexei,
so kind way to say it,
grows up, and he is the lord of a very wealthy, but as I said, rural province. And so he has, ruling a province down pat. He's been doing it for quite some time. He's been in power for about 10 years by the time he meets Dmitri. And so he comes to this, and his question is not like, am I capable of ruling? It's, why is my husband not listening to me? Because we both know that my position should not be behind the throne. It really should be on it. And so, he has that tension of believing that he deserves something more than what he has. And that's, I think, also like that wanting to strive, or that wanting to grasp for something that you think that you're owed, is also a very human impulse. So I tried to give them kind of mismatched but interlocking insecurities.
Absolutely. I think we've all been there. I mean, I think there's imposter syndrome for a reason. I think, everybody feels like that at one point or another, like, oh my gosh, I can't, should I do this? Can I do this? Will I be able to do it well? Will people laugh at me? All of that, and at the same time, there's other people that just like walk in and like seemingly own it. So, I mean, I appreciate the differences that can complement as well as like force apart at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I like to think of my characters as puzzle pieces that don't quite fit together, because if they're puzzle pieces and they interlock perfectly, it's not any fun. I like mashing my puzzle pieces together and being like, why won't you fit? Why won't you fit? Yeah. That's always the most delicious, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about the mysticism that's sprinkled
Sure.
throughout that weaves its way in from, the drinks to even, and I don't know if it's a spoiler to talk about reanimation.
I mean, it comes out very quickly
Okay.
that
I just want
Alexei is dead. So, at the end of Dimitri's first chapter and the beginning of Alexei's second chapter, it is very apparent that what has gone very wrong with Dimitri's
to.
ex-husband is that he has undergone a ritual that he concocted, which has had him die and then be reborn in an unbreakable, immortal body. He now believes that he is communing directly with God, and that God is telling him what to do, and that he has earned this right and earned the power that he has by
Mhm.
prevailing through this test that God has set him.
Yes.
And so he obviously is extremely satisfied with what has happened because
Well, yeah.
he now has power beyond his wildest dreams, and he used this power to win the war that he fought against Dimitri. Dimitri, on the other hand, begins the book exceptionally distressed, not just because he lost the war, but also because something is very wrong with his husband. Not just that he came back from the dead, but one of my favorite tropes is he came back from the dead totally wrong. So, yeah, what could be worse than coming back from the dead? Coming back from the dead totally screwed up.
Yeah.
So this was not the man that he knew. This was not the man that he loved and married. Something happened to him over the course of dying and being reborn, and this is what you get. So one of the things that I really wanted to do was, instead of making up a magic system from whole cloth, I wanted to use existing Jewish myths and magic, because truth is stranger than fiction. And Judaism, before the 1800s, so we would call it pre-Reformation Judaism,
Okay.
was a much more magical and almost pagan, very superstition-bound religion.
Okay.
And this was especially true in Eastern Europe. What happened was, in the 1800s, in an effort to combat, hopefully some of the anti-Semitism that they were seeing, rabbis and community leaders started trying to get rid of, some of the stuff that was seen as pagan or very different than Christianity. And so a lot of these seemingly strange to us rituals and beliefs, things that you could do to summon demons or things that you could do to talk to angels, this is strange to a lot of modern day Jews. But what I wanted to do was engage in a thought exercise of what would my religion have looked like if in the 1800s people weren't trying to make it palatable to Christians. What would have been brought forward that was instead left behind? So I wanted to delve into herbalism. There was a strong tradition of Ashkenazi herbalism. I wanted to delve into magic spells. I wanted to delve into folk tales and ways in which you can summon angels. So everything in the book that you read, with very few exceptions, is an actual Jewish folk tale or a piece of myth or, ancient claim, like that if you and don't do this at home, if you the afterbirth of a black cat and you dried it and you powdered it and you put it in your eyes, you could see demons. Yeah, as I said, don't try that at home. That is not safe. That is
not recommended.
but it's very interesting and kind of strange sounding stuff, and I just found that absolutely fascinating. So I wanted to use this as an excuse to introduce some of these really wild, cool, like fantasy seeming traditions to readers, but also introduce readers to what I really feel very deeply is the beauty of the religion. And I wanted to use the book to explore, some of the differences in the way that a Jewish story would be told as opposed to a Christian normative story, where usually a main character is on a journey to be absolved of some kind of sin or flaw. They are redeemed and then they are victorious. This story doesn't have any of that. It's very much a story of reckoning with, what does it mean to repent for actions? What does it mean to be forgiven and forgive yourself? What does it mean to seek, your faith, and what do different expressions of faith mean? And there's a lot of questioning and asking and not a lot of answers, which is, in my mind, a very fundamentally Jewish way of telling a story. So anything that you read in the book, it's pretty much true. My editor was very fantastic, and she let me write an author's note from a more scholarly perspective at the end of the book, which also includes a bibliography of some of my favorite sources. So if this is something you're interested in, definitely check out those academic texts, which are presenting these myths and this magic with, kind of the commentary and context and background that they deserve.
Absolutely. So I'm joined in conversation with Laura Samotin, masterful storyteller, The Sins on Their Bones. And just want to say, like, how great it is that you didn't let that sit and not come forward, right? So that readers today can learn more about it, right? And, the understanding and some of the traditions. And I think that that's spectacular, to learn a different way. Like it just makes us better, as human beings, I think.
One of the most rewarding things about having published this book is having, it's kind of twofold, right? One is having Jewish readers message me or meet me at events and say, this is the first time I ever read a fantasy book where I really felt at home. And that I just love that every single time, that I'm able to give that to people, that they found comfort in reading this, and that they were able to go into it and say, wow, these people look like me. And now I'm the one who gets all the in-jokes. I'm the one who understands, oh, this is an analog for a real world religious thing that we do. I'm the one who's getting, all of these little things. And for Christian readers, maybe it's just going over their head. And then the other thing that I absolutely love is hearing from readers where they say, I've never read a Jewish story before. I've even had some readers contact me who said, I've never met a Jewish person before. And your book was the first introduction that I had to this religion and this culture. And now I'm going to go learn more. So that's been very rewarding for me to, use this story as a way to get to, show my culture to other people, but also share it with people for whom this is a meaningful experience because it's their background too.
Yeah, I think when you can do both, I think that's a talent as a writer, because I found myself, I have a few friends who are Jewish, but it just gives me a better understanding, which I love learning, right? And it inspires that curiosity. And so you did it in a very thoughtful way, not only with an incredible story, right, that has really deep meaning, but you also compiled this list of resources at the end to continue people wanting to learn, right? And I think the more you learn and understand, I don't know, you're the one with the international relations, political science degree to say, we have more in common than we have differences, which sounds like it's, overstated. But at the same time, being open to learning and being curious. I mean, I think that's the cool thing. Like the blue liquid, I'm like, whoa, I want some, right? That she prepares. And I think Dimitri's court is like the coolest group of people. Like I totally want to go hang out with them. Let's go grab a beer, guys. It's just
me too.
Yeah, they're these fictional characters, but that's the gift of a storyteller, is to create these characters that will stay with me long after I turn the page, right? And the fact that there's a sequel coming is even better. So that's tremendous. Yeah, I'm blown away, and I'm so glad to see people are so happy. I think I told you in the email that when I bought the book at a particular bookstore, it wasn't Max Back, sorry, Suzanne. But when I bought it, the person who was checking it out was raving, oh my God, this is the best book I've read in a long time. I absolutely love it. You'll love it. He was so excited about this book. And I read it, and I'm like, I totally and completely understand. And it's nice to see a story where things are the norm and not the exception or the token character. It's a love story, right? Who doesn't want to get behind a love story? It's a story about clash and war and who wins. And
yeah, I mean, first off, massive shout out to the booksellers, because booksellers have championed this book like far beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm just very grateful every time I see booksellers promoting this book or facing it out on shelves so the cover's on display, or including me in events or putting it on social media. It's been really great. Booksellers and librarians are the true heroes in my book.
Well, you do feature a really cool library, but it has a creepy librarian. So hopefully I'm not a stereotypical creepy librarian.
I mean, I think that the librarian in the book is awesome. He's actually the character who I would love to hang out with the most. There's a very creepy magic library in the book, and it's staffed by a very eccentric librarian, and he's secretly one of my favorite characters. And I would like to hang out with him in his magic library all day.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Just, I wouldn't want any of the books that, spit at scholars that tried to read them, or, whatever else was going on in his crazy mystic library. So
yeah, exactly. But I mean, even I'm going to say her name wrong, Ladushka.
You said it right.
Okay. I listened to the audio as well. And I have to say, whoever, if you have a say so in that, they did a marvelous job, because there were different voices for the different points of view.
Did an amazing job. So my audiobook was absolutely phenomenal. And I think that the 3 actors who were chosen, funny story on the audiobook, I am not an audiobook listener. And so I thought I was going to have I was going to have nothing to do with this process. And I had my initial call with the producer, who was amazing. And I was like, don't worry about me. You just do what you think is good. She said, well, no, I want you to be invested in this experience. So I'll send you the auditions and you listen to them. And I said, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to tell who's good and who isn't. So I want you to pick. She said, I'll pick if you want me to, but I'm listen first.
Yeah.
So I got, I think 10, 12 auditions. And initially we were going to select one narrator for the entire audiobook. And I started listening, and I hit an audition. I was like, oh my God, that's Alexi. Yep. And then I played the next one, and I was like, wait a minute, that's Dimitri. And then I played another one, and I was like, oh my God, that's Vasily.
Yeah.
So I wrote them this email. I was sitting on the couch. It was late at night too. And I was getting chills listening to this, because I was like, that's their voice. That's what they sound like. And it was really, really gratifying to be able to work with the narrators. So Daniel, Aaron, and Robin were phenomenal actors. And it was just incredible to listen to them bring the characters to life. I got so much joy out of listening to that in a way I never thought I would, because I'm not an audiobook listener.
Will you be now?
I am now. Yeah, I am now.
If it is read well, it completely transports you. I'm the only one, I think sometimes that I'm happy that there's traffic, because I get to spend more time listening to,
it absolutely does transport you. And I think that just working with artists and being able to see my characters visually, now I know what they sound like. And so when I write scenes from their points of view, it's like, to me, it's in that voice. Mm-hmm. And I'm even lucky enough sometimes, Daniel, who's the narrator who plays Vasily, I'll text him and I'll say, hey, can you read this? And then send it to me as a voice note, and he will. So, it's always amazing, I think, as a writer, to be able to work with such talented artists who can really bring a completely different talent to the work that you're creating. And it's so enriching. And for me, it's just so, so cool.
It is so cool because I'm listening and I can hear like the sneer at times in Alexi's voice. I was like, how did he do that? Right. And so
Robin as Alexi scared me really badly. And that was actually like the audition I listened to first. And I was like, that's Alexi. I was like, this guy's voice is terrifying. So he did an amazing job. And all of them is just, it's so evocative, Aaron, as Dimitri. There's times where he's just so desperately sad, and I'm like, I want to hug Dimitri in the scene. Like, you can hear the despair, and Daniel brings so much longing to Vasily. And there's actually one key part of the book that is in a chapter that Dimitri would narrate. We actually got Daniel as Vasily to read this one segment, because when I heard it, it was so beautiful. I was like, there's got to be a way that we can have this in the actual audiobook. And the producer was very lovely and included that. So I don't want to, that's a major spoiler. So I don't want to say what it is. But if you are an audiobook fan, definitely give this audiobook a listen. It's so good. And I'm not saying that because I'm biased, because it's my book. It's truly like these three actors brought so much talent to this.
Incredibly well done. I mean, you can imagine, as a librarian, you know, we read a lot, we listen to a lot. And I mean, these characters, the depth that the actors gave to the story. And, you know, I've learned you can't read and drive. It's dangerous. So I like read and listen and then like have to hurry up and figure out like where I am in the book to like pick up the next spot. Right. But it just is beautiful. I mean, there's beautiful lines in this story, you know, just gorgeous that you wrote, that this is what life is, looking someone in the eye and handing them your heart and saying, I trust you to patch the broken pieces of this. This is the part of being alive that is messy and beautiful and painful and perfect. Like, I read that and I was like,
I did write that. Sometimes people will read lines to me and I'll be like, that was in the book? And they'd be like, yeah, it's right here. I'll be like, oh, wow.
Yeah, no, beautiful. So I'm joined in conversation with the amazing Laura Samotin, The Sins on Their Bones. So like, not only, this is so goofy, not only did I read it because that was the part where I wasn't driving, so I was reading the book, but then I had to listen to it, and then I had to like go back like 30 seconds and listen to it again and go back. And it's just, sometimes things just hit you right here. And you just did such a wonderful job because you create this world and this tension and these characters that you just absolutely love and cheer for and understand and like and don't like, and then like them again all at the same time. So
that's
beautifully done.
Compliment as an author. So thank you so much. That's honestly all I could ever hope for from a reading experience, is feeling like these are real people who, you know, you're right there beside as they're going through a whole bunch of stuff, and, you know, just immersing yourself and escaping into a world and having it feel real. That to me is the biggest compliment that any reader can give me, that they felt like the world was real and the people were real.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that I want to go drinking with Dimitri and his court, just because I thought they were such interesting people and all had different roles that were complicated, but they complemented one another and they worked well together. You know, Ladushka says it's never easy to acquire knowledge. It requires patience and persistence, and that knowledge is found in all kinds of places. I mean, I just think, again, maybe I'm thinking a little bit too much, overthinking, shock. But thinking about like, it's really how we should be. We should be open to learning, and wherever that comes from, whatever conversation, whatever we read, watch, you know, music that we hear, it just makes everything better.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to do a larger cast, so Dimitri and Vasily are joined in exile by 3 other people. So there's Ladushka, who is Dimitri's chancellor, his right-hand political person. There is Annika, who is his top general. And there is Misha, who is the court physician. And the 3 of them are really some of Dimitri's best friends. Some of them have grown up with him. Some of them joined on later when he became the Tsar. But all of them care deeply about him, and all of them bring something different to the table in terms of what they offer to him as people, so as friends and as a found family, but also as really sharp and intelligent political operators in their own right.
Yes.
And so one of the things that, I think is a really fun challenge when you are writing a found family book is to have this big cast where everyone feels unique and different. And it doesn't feel like any of the characters are just two-dimensional, like, oh, that's the doctor friend. I really wanted people to be able to say, like, yeah, I want to go get drinks with Misha. Like,
Right.
I think I would want to hang out with Alexander, but Misha's the person I would want to go out on the town with because they're so fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And like, then I want to go home and sit on the couch with Annika. As
Exactly. Like when I'm hungover after all the drinks, I want
she'll
Annika.
take care of you. And then
Yeah, exactly.
Ladushka is like, when you wake up the next morning and you need to work, she will keep you on track.
Yeah.
Like, she will show her care for you by flicking your hand as you reach for your phone and being like, stay on task.
Yeah, I mean, we all need people like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I wanted readers to be able to feel like they were really meeting a bunch of unique people and not just flat stereotypical characters.
I from my perspective, you accomplished that and then some. So thank you. Because I love reading, right? That will never change, but it's really special when you get a chance to be in conversation with the people who write the words that you read and to understand the backstory behind it and where that came from. And like, now I'm never like going to go back and listen to the audio again and hear it differently because I know how it came to be. So really wonderful, wonderful book. Gorgeous lines, the other thing that struck me is how your philosophy degree kind of winds with these big questions, right? Like you can't mend someone who doesn't want to heal.
Yeah. So I think that part of what I wanted to do with the book was not just explore religion and culture, but also explore some of these psychological questions that are personally meaningful to me, just because of my life experiences and some of what I study as well. And so I think there's some big questions that are asked in the book, and each character has their own answers to these big questions. And in book 2, you'll see even more of that. So I'm very excited for readers to get to come back to Novo Svitsevo a second time.
Cannot wait. Cannot wait to come back. So first of all, thank you for doing that and creating this amazing world, this cast of characters, infusing it with, your background and mysticism so that we're even more curious to learn. It's amazing. It's a gift. So I've joined in conversation with Laura Samotin, The Sins on Their Bones. So we have, this is what, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. Okay, like 9 months to wait. Yep. So read it again, give it as gifts. It's an absolutely fabulous story. Listen to the audio, read the book. So as we wrap up, the final 5 questions. Okay. If you could travel anywhere next week, where to?
Novo Svitsevo. Am I allowed to say that?
Absolutely. I want to go too, right? And I can say it's for research. Would you rather live in the mountains or at the beach?
Mountains, 100%.
100%. Okay. What is always part of your writing routine?
So my writing foods are Diet Sprite and baby kosher dill pickles. It's a very strange thing that I'm now somewhat known for. So I always have to have my Diet Sprite and baby kosher dill pickles on hand. Otherwise, I can't write.
I was going to say, like, keep up that habit, because if that's what it was for this book, awesome. What song would you sing at karaoke?
I don't do karaoke. So I'm terribly tone deaf and I can't sing at all. So I will watch other people do karaoke, but you will never catch me singing.
Me either. Perfect. And then finally, what's the best thing about being a writer?
The best thing about being a writer is that I get to vividly hallucinate, write it down on pieces of dead trees, and then put it out into the world and get other people to hallucinate along with me. I think it's a huge privilege and an honor to be able to publish books that other people read, and to be able to touch people with those stories. I think it's so miraculous to me. And I am eternally grateful every day for my publishers, all of the people who have worked on this book, my agent, everyone, and especially every reader who picks it up and is curious about it and reads it. And I just think that that's one of the coolest things I've ever been able to do in my life. And
you say with this remarkable background and where you work, your quote unquote day job.
Yeah, I wanted to be an author since I was 8 years old. And so my parents actually kept a bunch of schoolwork from when I was a little kid. And we found, after I got my book deal for The Sins on Their Bones, a quote unquote book that I had written in like second grade. And inside I have written like, it was a questionnaire. It said like, what is your dream job? And it said to be an author. And I said, what do you like the most? It's like to read books. And then I signed the book, Laura Resnick, author, age 8.
Aww.
And so I found that and I was like, you know what? How many people get to say that they actually went out and accomplished their childhood dreams? Not very many.
Not very many.
I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to do that. So to me, it's the most beautiful and miraculous part of being a writer, is getting to do that and then getting to share it with so many other people.
Wow. Thank goodness for writers like you who create such beautiful stories that leave us asking these big questions. And I love the fact that they're not answered in the book per se, and every person, I mean, that's the great thing about books, is they bring us together to discuss some of these big things, which is one of my favorite things to do. And so I'm so lucky and so grateful for you joining us this evening. So I want to say thank you for that. I want to say thank you to MaxBacks for making sure that they have books, because I know you're going to want to run out and order The Sins on Their Bones. Thank you to Mike, making sure everything looks good, sounds good. Jen Jumba with Cleveland Public Library and Writers Unplugged. Thank you so much and happy reading.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.